Hello, word nerds! Welcome to our live chat today. We're going to be talking about retellings, talk about fairy tale retellings, and other types of I don't quite know how to say that, but we're trying to be talking just about things that people have redone and put out for our reading enjoyment. I thought we'd go down and just say what if we have a favorite retelling. It's okay if you have more than one, but oh no, other people don't prepare for this. Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay, I'm so ready. Okay, let's see. Oh, I do have Emma as my first one. I already think I know what you're gonna say.
Megan can't steal mine because mine is Cruel Beauty by Rosamund Hodge.
There we go.
I love that book a lot. I think it's a really good retelling because it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but it also I like retellings that pull in elements of other stories in addition to the one they're retelling. So it has like some Rumpelstiltskin vibes and pulls in part of the Bluebeard myths and some Greek mythology, like a lot of different things. And it's very like, it's Beauty and the Beast, but also like, it's very different. You can like see those little touchstones of moments that are Beauty and the Beast moments. So it does such a great job.
Sounds good. Next up, I have Kelly.
I think for me, the one I have to pick is one that I wouldn't have even really known it was a retelling unless it wasn't in the blurb. But For Darkness Shows the Stars by Diana Peterfriend is a retelling of Persuasion. I have never read Persuasion, but I love both of those books in the series. The second one is a retelling of something as well. But
it's Scarlet Pimpernel.
Okay. Yeah, have not read that either, but they're both really great books. So.
And I have read Persuasion and also love For Darkness Shows the Stars. So it's great if you have or haven't read the source material.
Ooh, have to check it out. Then I have Kyra, who was very prepared apparently.
Well, no, as I was getting ready for this, like I don't feel like I'm someone who reads a ton of retelling, so I was like going through my Goodreads, and I actually have read more than I thought I had. But if I were to recommend one, I'd say The Only Thing Worse Than Me Is You by Lily Anderson. It's a modern retelling of, let me make sure I get this Shakespeare play right, Much Ado About Nothing. And it's got, like, it's contemporary, it's set at a school where, like, all the kids are geniuses, and it's got, like, a lot of geek culture in it, so.
That's amazing.
And it's so sassy. The characters are so terrible to each other. The dialogue is just perfect, so I really like that one.
I feel like if it's Shakespeare, you know it's going to be sassy.
Yeah. Well, especially with that play, because they're just, in the play, like, ruthless towards each other, and she really captures that in the books, so.
Amazing. Then I have Megan.
This is an older one, but I love Ella Enchanted. It's like my favorite retelling of ever. Not the movie.
Ugh.
Anne Hathaway. I love you. How could you have done that to me?
And the guy who plays the prince is so attractive in that movie too, but they just ruined the movie. Cast well, scripted terribly.
Yeah.
Isn't the guy who plays Wesley in Princess Bride like
yeah,
Peter King?
he's the villain.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, he is.
The evil like uncle is one of the issues I have with that movie, that they felt the need to add a villain because there's no villain in the book. Like it's all internal struggle in the book, and they were like, we have to have this external struggle, and it just ends up being stupid.
Agreed.
I have a lot of feelings about that movie.
The book is great, though. Everyone should read the book if you want a retelling.
Oh, and that's me. My favorite retelling is The Shadow Queen by C.J. Redwine, which is a Snow White retelling, but it's kind of like, if everyone saw Snow White and the Huntsman, it's kind of like that movie, but better in book format. So it's super creepy and super dark, and Snow White has a brother, and the evil queen has control over shadows and stuff, and then also the prince is the prince and the huntsman, but he's also a dragon, and it's in this fantasy world with fairies, and like, oh, it's so cool, and no one knows about it. So every time I get plugged this, I want to plug it because it's just a super neat, really dark book that I love it so much. I think it's really cool. So that being said, does everyone have just a favorite retelling? Because I know some people are like, oh man, like I love Cinderella, like I just want to see every single movie there ever was made of it, or like one of my friends, or like people that are just like, oh, I just like read whatever. Do you guys have a favorite one that you go after all the time?
I will definitely give any Beauty and the Beast retelling a try. Like If it's Beauty and the Beast, I'll probably pick it up just to see what I think. But I do like Cinderella ones too. They tend to be pretty good.
I found I like retellings of like classical literature more than fairy tale retellings. Partially because they're not done as much. Like Cinderella has been done so many times, and there's some Cinderella retellings I liked. I really liked Geekerella. I like
Oh, yeah.
I love that book. It was adorable.
Yeah, and I like Cinder a lot. But
The whole Lunar Chronicles in general, just amazing.
Yeah. I think the hard thing in general about fairy tale retellings is they have been done so much that you really do have to find a unique spin and execute it well. So like it can be really difficult because like if you just do like a basic Beauty and the Beast retelling, then it's like, well, Robin McKinley did this like 20 years ago twice. Like, you know, like there's only so much you can do with a very by the book retelling of this. There has to be something.
With the fairy tales, you know it's
sci-fi, you know.
Yeah, well, you know what's gonna happen, right? You're like, okay, Cinderella, like she's gonna go to the ball, and then there's gonna be a prince, and she's gonna lose a shoe, and then live happily ever after. Like, you know what's gonna happen. So that's what I really appreciated about the Lunar Chronicles, just in general, was that everything was kind of being combined and just thrown together, and so like you had inklings of it, but it wasn't the pure one. Or like even in Cinder, if this is a spoiler, if like anyone hasn't read it, but you've had time to read it, it's great. When she loses her whole foot, like that's hilarious. Yeah. And like super embarrassing, but also I love the way that played into the whole android thing. She's not gonna lose a shoe, her leg's just gonna come off. Whoops.
I love that. Yeah. I'm always really impressed by the retellings that like I can't tell are retellings. Like Throne of Glass was technically like Cinderella, but Cinderella's an assassin was how it was pitched. And I feel like, you know, at some point there's going to be a ball and everything else. But like if everything else is so different that I don't feel like, oh, well, obviously Cinderella's going to lose a shoe and get the guy and blah, blah. Those are the ones I'm more drawn to because I hate being able to predict the ending.
Yeah, I like when they're just when they're different enough that I'm still questioning what's actually going to happen. Yeah, like Cinder, the whole time, like all through the Lunar Chronicles, I was like, but will they get together? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Or it's like, you've changed just enough that I'm not convinced you won't tear them apart just to break my heart.
Well, also, like, even if we're going to go back to the Lunar Chronicles, because, I mean, Marissa and I just did such a fantastic job with them, with Wolf, how he waffles back and forth all the time, being like, is he actually a good guy? Like, are they going to end up well together? And then at the end, you're like, oh my god, you still don't know. Because he's like technically turned into the wolf, and you're like, oh god, like what's going to happen? So it's just, you just keep guessing, even though you're like, I already know what's going to happen, but you don't.
We had a question.
Already?
Yes. Kind of like a two-parter. So the first part, or the first question, I guess, that Aoife asked was, does it count as a retelling if it doesn't follow the exact storyline of the original story? So if you use the same world with a new protagonist, is that a retelling or just fan fiction? Second half, like, what is the difference between fan fiction and a straight up retelling?
I'm sorry, I'm using Starbucks Wi-Fi, and I did not get any of that.
With fan fiction, you're going to be using like the same characters and the same world, where like, and just like maybe changing one thing. Also, I think one of the main things with retellings is that a retelling has to be something that's like in the public domain. Like you can't write a retelling of Harry Potter because there's copyright issues. But you can write a retelling of Frankenstein because it's so old that it's in the public domain now. No one owns the copyright. So that is actually like a main difference publishing-wise. But also, yeah, it just kind of has to do, I think, with how much of the original source material you're using sometimes too.
Yeah. Honestly, if it's a really old fairy tale, like it's been around for hundreds of years or whatever, I wouldn't worry at all about it being fan fiction.
Yeah. It's an interesting question overall, though, of like, where is that line? But I guess in a way, retellings are fan fiction. Just
I think copyright and like your purpose are the two main things that are going to set it apart, honestly. Mostly copyright.
Yeah. That being said, if you want to do like a Wizard of Oz retelling and it looks and sounds and feels a lot like Dorothy Must Die, that's when you're crossing into the realm of like fan fiction, or it would be seen more as fan fiction. Like if you borrow too many unique ideas in a retelling that already exists in the market. So if you're like, wouldn't it be cool if Dorothy was the queen and she's a bad guy? Like, that's already been done. You can write a fan fiction for it, and that'll be fun. But like,
a lot of people I've seen get caught up in the Disney versions of stuff, thinking like they can put something in that was in a Disney movie that wasn't in the original, whereas that's Disney's idea. You can't use that. So it is just, you have to research the story that you're using.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think retellings are more interesting when they deviate from like kind of the Disney. Like I love Disney fairy tale movies, but a lot of retelling books are gonna be more interesting if you're delving into the original fairy tales.
Well, in the original fairy tales are just super dark, but I like that kind of thing.
That's
so I'm okay with that. Exactly.
It's happy assume it was Disney's idea.
Exactly. Well, actually, I thought it was really cute. There's the book Flame in the Mist by Renee Ahdieh, her new one, which is technically a retelling of Mulan. It was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. But it was fun because there was a little ode, little homage to the Disney version of it, because she's doing the swimming in the hot spring at one point, and like the guy comes over and she's like, oh no, like kind of thing. Like, so that was pretty funny. I was like, okay, I see that little tap, like that's hilarious. But the rest of it was like very fairly different besides just the general idea of it.
She also did her first book was a retelling of
Arabian Nights.
Yeah.
It was 1001 Nights,
1001 Nights. And it was super good. It's called The Wrath of the Dawn. And you should all read it.
Also, like, I really like retellings about that aren't, sorry, I'm in Starbucks. About things that aren't just purely fairy tales. Like, I really like when, for example, the 1001 Arabian Nights, or if you were doing a retelling of the Canterbury, it's not the retelling that is the fairy tale one, like I'm trying to think of, like The Wizard of Oz. I love those kind of things because they're just different enough, and they're just outside the realm of fairy tale that I think you could do more with them. So there's a fly in here. It is super into me right now. Like, if you want autograph later, go away.
Well, like Kyra mentioned, retellings of classic literature too, which I think like it was really in a few years ago, and it's still kind of, it's like a thing these days that a lot of people are doing. So like I love, a good one is Ivory and Bone by Julie Eshbach. I love that book so much.
Really?
Yep.
What is it a retelling of?
Okay. Pride and Prejudice, but it's gender swap.
Yes, but it's with like cavemen.
Yeah, and like in like the prehistoric era. I really love it.
It was good, really?
I loved that book. It was like, it's just
really good things.
It's very unique, and I really liked it. And it's kind of in second person, which is not something I'd be into, but like there's a reason for it, and it's really cool. So because
check it out.
The male character is like telling their story to the female character, so he's like using you, but he's like addressing a specific person, not just like the reader, which I don't like that kind of second person. But yeah, it's really cool.
Okay.
The second book is also very good. Yes, it's a very unique twist on like a classic literature, and I like that it's gender swapped too. It's a really cool idea to like look at if like the girl is the one that's like standoffish, you know. So.
Can we talk about any favorite like gender swapped?
Yes,
sort of.
Love gender swapped.
Okay,
I love gender swapped.
I'll kick us off.
Sure, do it.
I have one on my list that I kind of wanted to talk about. The Locke and Maury by, I think the author is Heather Petty.
Oh yeah.
So it's a retelling of Sherlock, sort of kind of an origin story that's like contemporary, set in London. Sherlock and Moriarty are both teenagers, but Moriarty's a girl, and there's some romance between her and Sherlock, which is fascinating. But it's still like it's definitely still like her villain origin story. So.
Interesting.
I think the second book in that series came out, and I haven't read it yet because it wasn't out when I read the first one, and I need to like go revisit that because I definitely wanted to see where that series was going.
This one, I don't know if you could call it like gender swapped necessarily, because it was kind of like, I wish Erin was here. She kind of wrote a retelling for Brian and Gray. But this one is similar to that, where it's like the daughter, but the madman's daughter is a retelling of the Island of Dr. Moreau with Juliet as the main character, and
it's really good.
It's so dark and so good.
Oh, I am intrigued.
Yeah, and the first one is the Island of Dr. Moreau. The second one is Jekyll and Hyde, and the third one is Frankenstein, I think.
Oh my gosh. Hells yeah.
I might have the order wrong, but there's 3 books, and they're all different retellings of classic literature.
Cool.
It's so good.
Yeah, well, there's one that I really want to read. I have it. I just haven't. I read a little bit of it. Sometimes We Tell the Truth by maybe like Xander or Zinda, something with a Z. And that's a retelling of the Canterbury Tales. And I think that's so cool because it's my favorite piece of literature. Canterbury Tales is one of like my favorites. So it's about a bunch of kids on a bus, like going on a field trip, and they all get bored. So they all start telling each other stories, and like each of the characters kind of has their own character that they're embodying from Canterbury Tales. It's pretty funny.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like going through my list of books I've read.
Yeah. Well, I know it's not. I mean, this is technically a retelling, but I really, really love Sarah J. Maas's The Court of Thorns and Roses, because the first one's Beauty and the Beast, but the second one is based on the myth of Hades and Persephone, and I love that idea. I love how it came through in that book. I love how it changed.
Persephone are really hard to do.
They are. Well,
but a lot of
like,
bad ones.
Yeah. Well, because you see a couple of just plain Hades and Persephone myth, like just like Greek god kind of books, and I'm not into them. Like, basically, Rick Riordan just took over the whole Greek god retelling scene, and like that's his alone. But I haven't read another one with Greek gods that's really that good. So I know that there's like that one like of Poseidon or something, and there's another one like the Goddess Test, I think, and those are retellings. But I'm like,
Meg Cabot has a modern retelling of Hades and Persephone, and it was okay. I read all 3 of them, but they're like,
oh really?
Yeah, they're like, it's like Hades and Persephone, but it very much has the feel of kind of like the early 2000s paranormal romance books. It's like Twilight with Hades and Persephone. Basically.
Oh dear, oh dear.
I read all 3 of them, but they weren't like spectacularly written. But I do think
Twilight a retelling. I can't remember of what classic literature, but it was.
No, she just had a dream.
Oh, all right.
She had a dream about a hot vampire. Yeah,
I also
that's
really
like
like
the origin story. She had a dream, and
she had a dream of the scene where they're in the meadow. That was the dream.
Yeah,
yeah, sparkly. Yeah, no, I
2
remember
characters talking in a meadow, and she was like, "I should write a book about that."
You can't knock it. That's how I had the idea for my book that's on subs.
Exactly. She made a lot of money off it, so I mean. I also really like retellings that look at like different formats. Like I think I've recommended this in one of my videos recently, but there's a webcomic called Beauty and the Beast by Megan Kearney. And it's really, really good, and it's cool. It's all in black and white. And she also like plays with the story. So it's not just like the original, but it is kind of traditional in a lot of ways, but it's really, really good. So I do like, there's a lot of graphic novel retellings out there now. And a lot of them tend to be really good. So they're a cool, like, new way to experience them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, there's this whole revamp of all the Disney movies, so I think everyone's trying to go along with that trend, which I'm not mad at. I mean, the reason that they're redoing all the Disney movies is because they're running out of time for, I think their contracts are up for the rights to them, so they have to redo them all to be able to keep the rights to all of them. But I'm not mad at it because I love fairy tale retellings because I love fairy tales and I love old literature, and I'm like, yo, if you want to make that, you want to make the evil queen come to life, like, I'm okay with that.
Oh, I just remembered that Damsel Distressed is technically a retelling.
Oh, yeah.
And I love Damsel Distressed.
Yes.
So I still need to read that. I remember seeing that video on our channel forever ago.
It is so good. I'm always fascinated by contemporary retellings of fairy tales.
They can be really hard to do.
Yeah, because I don't understand how you do it.
Yeah. Like some elements are just so hard to transform. And also with classic books, like any modern retelling of a Jane Austen book, they tend to be really difficult because so much of them is about class structures and like marriage and, so it's hard to like figure out a way to make those translate.
Kelsey Mackey is a pro. She did it so well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's art in the book too. So, and there's a soundtrack. We had a question from Davis Hicks. Question from someone considering writing a retelling. To what degree should you consider your source material? The last thing I'd want to do is devalue the original work.
You mean like how faithful do you need to be? Because that's completely up to the writer. I mean, some fairy tales are very faithful, like Beauty by Robin McKinley. It's a very faithful Beauty and the Beast retelling, whereas like Cruel Beauty is very different and just like is inspired by like some of the major like plot points and themes of it. So it really just depends on what you want to do.
Yeah.
I think in general, it needs to use the themes of the story. That's the most important thing, is you figure out what themes you want to focus on from it.
Sorry guys, I'll be right back. My computer's dying and I just need to go move seats where there is a plug.
Good luck. Yeah, I think I would agree with that as well. It's really mostly about the story that you want to tell. Like what part of the original source material makes you want to write a retelling of it. And then you can really decide from there how much or how little you want to stick to it. For example, I wrote a book that is technically a retelling of The Prince and the Pauper, but most of it is its own thing. They just kind of like come together, switch places. People don't recognize the original person. And so it's really like as much or as little as you want it to be. Mm-hmm. Although the closer you follow it, the tougher it's going to be if you want to traditionally publish it.
Because someone has probably already done close retelling.
Yeah.
Well, I think that depends entirely on what, again, like for fairy tales, all the fairy tales have been done a ton of times. Like classic myths have been done a lot. But there's a lot of like totally untapped like classical literature. Like I don't think I've ever seen any sort of like retelling of Wuthering Heights, which I think would be awesome. If someone wants to write that, you should.
I feel like there is one in YA, but I don't think it's super big. Like I don't think it did well.
But that like you could totally. So I could see that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely depends on how much it's been done. So like anything very mainstream, like anything that a Disney movie was based on, there's going to be a lot of retellings, like Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty. There's going to be a lot of them out there.
Which isn't to say you can't still do those, but you have to have a pretty original spin on it.
And make sure you're familiar with, I would say, make sure you're familiar with the really famous retellings of those fairy tales, so that you know what's already been done.
Yeah.
So
I googled.
Sorry, go ahead, Megan.
I googled Wuthering Heights retellings to see if one would immediately come up, and the first thing that came up was Wuthering Nights, an erotic retelling of Wuthering Nights.
Yes.
Ooh, hey.
Wuthering Nights. It's a great title.
So apparently that one still has other directions you can go with it. Erotica's taken, but anything else.
I would totally read the Wuthering Heights retelling. So
exactly.
Yeah. If somebody does that, let me know. And I love I love discovering retellings that are based off of like lesser known fairy tales. Like one of my favorites from when I was younger is Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. Which is an
is that any good? I've had my eye on that for a little while.
Amazing book. And it's a very classic retelling of the fairy tale, but it's also a fairy tale that most people don't know and that hasn't really been retold much. So she's able to do
that.
It's the fairy tale's called The Goose Girl.
Oh, okay.
It's literally the same thing. But yeah, since she chose a lesser known fairy tale, she was able to do a more classic spin on it. So
I love lesser knowns. Like one of my favorite ones is another. I actually don't know what it's called. It is another like goose one. It might even be a Goose Girl. I'm not quite sure if that's true or not. But it's like this girl who has a bunch of brothers and they get cursed by a witch and she's not allowed to speak, but she has to make them these nettle shirts. And there's a prince that falls in love with her and locks her in a tower because she's a witch, because she's making all these nettle shirts and she won't speak. And then at the very end, a bunch of all her brothers in swan form come down and she throws the nettle shirts on them and they become men again, except for the youngest brother, because she wasn't finished his shirt yet, so he still has one swan wing instead of an arm. It's my favorite my favorite fairy tale, and then but like no one knows about it, and I don't even know what it's called. Like it's one of those. So I'm gonna have to find it.
Yeah. Goose Girl
Goose
Girl is a princess that's like traveling to another kingdom to get married, and one of her like hand servants like revolts and takes her place, and so she has to work as a goose girl at the palace until she can like figure out a way to confront the maid and take her place back. That's good. And and it was a fairy tale that Shannon Hale loved as a child. And so she wrote a retelling of it. So I do know she had trouble getting it published though. Because, and that was a while ago. That was like 15 years ago or something. But she got told that like, because it was long enough to be a YA book. And they were like, in YA, we do like more like twisted, dark retellings of fairy tales, not classic happy retellings. But it eventually found a publisher and found an audience, and it's been like reprinted a million times. And
they just got new covers.
Yeah, I just got the new covers are beautiful.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of looking at it because it was still the new covers. Like, ooh, what is this? This is new.
I love it. If you ever just want like a sweet, like happy fairy tale retelling, it's a good.
Oh man. All right, fine.
Yeah, happily ever after or whatever.
Also,
the risk you run with retellings is that people do maybe already kind of know how it's going to end, and keeping them interested even though they kind of already know the story. But on the flip side of that, the advantage is if someone has a story that they really, really love and you say, hey, here's a new take on this thing you already really love, then that's, you know, that's appealing. So like if anybody does say I've written like a YA Wuthering Heights, I loved Wuthering Heights, like I'd go read that.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely a case to be made for, even though we like to be surprised by stories, we also have expectations. And I think in a lot of ways as readers, we like to know generally what's coming, you know, like I like to go into a book knowing that there's probably going to be a happy ending, you know, like that the main character's probably not going to die, you know, and like, so I think that's why retellings can be appealing, because even though we can be surprised by elements along the way, we like know generally what to expect from it.
And I also really like retellings that take like a story, like a classic story that doesn't end well and gives it a happy ending.
For real.
I'm good with that too.
We had a question. I can't find it right now, but I remember it. It was from Jody, and the question was, would it be considered a retelling if the same author writes like a different point of view of their book? For example, it was like the 10th anniversary edition of Twilight where Stephanie Meyer released, was it called Midnight Sun?
Yeah. No,
Life and Death.
Midnight Sun was the book from Edward's point of view that was never published.
I thought they did publish it.
No, it's called Life and Death. It's Life and Death is the one that published, where it's gender swapped. It's Life and Death.
Okay.
It's a super cool idea.
I guess it would technically be a retelling of her own book.
Yeah.
But you're allowed to do that because you have the rights to
get away with that. But
when you're Stephanie freaking Meyer, you can do it.
If you ever have a book that's that big, you can get away with it.
I totally forgot about that. We had another question from Dark Deluxe Fall. Do you have to pull a lot of aspects and themes to be considered a retelling? Could it just be inspired by fairy tales and Norse mythology and still be considered a retelling?
Yeah. I mean, you might not market it as a retelling. You might market it as inspired by this story, depending on how recognizable it is. Because you want people to have the right expectations for your book. So you don't want them to go in being like, oh, this is going to be Cinderella with just a few things changed if it's not, you know? So.
Like Sharon Cameron, I think is the author, her book, Rook, is she, in kind of the author's note at the end says, it's not really a retelling of the Scarlet Pimpernel, but it's kind of a homage too.
Or like we talked about Throne of Glass, which like she was originally inspired by Cinderella. Like she was like watching Cinderella, and when she was running away, she was like, what if instead of because of the clock ticking, it was because she just killed someone? So like it was a piece of her inspiration, but it's not a retelling of Cinderella in any way. Like
like another way to go through that is that Sarah J. Maas did that as well, where the first one was inspired by Cinderella, but then she just took it and ran with it, and now it is nothing like any type of fairy tale.
Even is very barely. Like you catch
Yeah,
a
very
couple
barely.
references and that's it. So
Yeah, that's,
it doesn't
and then
follow
now
the plot of Cinderella at all.
Yeah. Oh man, the 5th book is very different. Very different.
And honestly, again, the rules are probably different for if you're self or indie pubbing, but if you're traditionally publishing and it's unlike a retelling enough that you can just say it was inspired, I would honestly encourage you to do that because it's much, much harder to sell a Cinderella retelling than it is to say like, it's inspired by Cinderella. It's Cinderella meets assassins with magic.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you really like a certain fairy tale, you can just kind of add it into your own story without having to like make the entire thing like that. So you can have like a character that's inspired by this person, or you can have maybe you're like I personally want to do this one fairy book that I have in mind, and I wanted to add Peter Pan in somehow as one of the characters. So I'm not going to make it a Peter Pan retelling, but I'm definitely going to have hints of him in there because I think he's definitely some kind of fairy. Like you just know he is. So I think I'm going to like slip that in there, being like, oh, it's Pan or something like that, and being like, but. So a little like homage to that without making it a full retelling. Or like even there's another book, I cannot remember what it's called, but one of the characters, it's loosely inspired on Rumpelstiltskin. So, which I love. I love that story. I think it's so cool and creepy and weird. But that is one of the characters in there too. So it's not technically a retelling, but one of the characters is basically Rumpelstiltskin.
We had another question. How do you get over the fear of this has been done before when writing a retelling or a story with inspiration from a fairy tale or myth?
Well, I mean, it's never been done before because you've never done it before, so it's going to be different somehow.
Yeah, and I think
Think of how many
elements that are unique too.
Yeah, like yeah, definitely if you know that you have a unique take on it, a unique point of view on it, or twist, then you shouldn't be scared.
Like, think how many Cinderella retellings there are, but there's so many of them. But
Victorella
they're all
still
different,
just
and
got
people all love
published.
it. Yeah, oh, that book is so good. It's so cute. It's so
And
cute.
even
It's
if
so
you're
good.
not, yes, even if you're not writing a retelling, you're writing stuff that has already been done before. Like there's so many stories out there that it's impossible to write something that's 100% unique. So this is a fear that like it's totally common, it's totally normal, and you just have to trust that like no one's going to write this story the way you will, and if you're enjoying writing it, someone's going to enjoy reading it. Yes.
This is a great answer.
Do we have
Well, I had another thing that was my other discussion topic was, is there a retelling that you guys want to write? Like, what's one that you're like, man, I got to redo that my own way? If there is one, or just one, you know. We have like 5, that's cool too.
I've always wanted to do a Beauty and the Beast one because I love Beauty and the Beast so much, but it's a hard one because so many people have done it. And I don't currently have a unique take on it. I'm just like, it'd be cool to write something inspired by that or retelling that someday, but I'd have to have a good idea to make it different because there's a lot of them already. So I also would love to do something with 12 Dancing Princesses because I like that one a lot.
I would love to see like a 12 Dancing Princesses that's like set contemporary in like a dance studio. I don't necessarily want to write it, but I want someone to write that book.
I'd like to do a version that's kind of like
great
horror.
idea.
I read I think you would maybe classify it as magic realism. That was a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. It was really good.
Cool.
Oh my gosh, tell me what it is. I need to know.
I tried to find the title and I can't find it anywhere.
Oh man. Okay, if you do find it, please message me because
Yeah.
I love that. It's so cool. I love that story so much.
Yeah, I'll send it to you if I find it.
Going back to Rachel's question of like what we would want to write, I would love to do Phantom of the Opera.
Ooh, yes.
That'd be
A.G.
cool.
Howard, didn't she just somebody just released one? I think it's A.G. Howard. It's like Roseblood or something.
Oh yeah, the covers are so pretty.
Right. Well, she does that Alice in Wonderland inspired whole series, like Splintered, and then she just did one Phantom of the Opera, which is
I
gorgeous.
die every time a new cover gets released.
Right? It's so beautiful.
So-
I have not read it though.
So pretty.
Wait, what's the Phantom of the Opera one though? I'm like making.
I think it's called Roseblood, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the Phantom is a girl. In it.
I'm getting
Yeah, it's
so
also
many
gender swapped.
recommendations. My TBR is growing.
I haven't read it, but the covers are cool.
Yes.
Like I kind of said earlier, like my favorite story is the with all the swans and Swan Princess. I don't even remember what it's called. I'm gonna have to look it up now. It's gonna bother me.
Oh, someone
Sarah
says a thing in the comments.
Sorry,
Sarah B.
which?
Larson just did a Swan Princess retelling, I think. It's got a swan on the cover, and I'm pretty sure it's a retelling of something, so I'm going to guess Swan Princess.
Cool. All right. I don't even know what it's called, but I want to do something with that. I just think it's so cool. And like I said, I want to add the Peter Pan into something of mine.
Do you have any more questions?
Let us know if you have any questions. Or if I missed your question, please re-ask it.
Dark Breaks the Dawn is the Swan Princess retelling.
Okay, I'm writing this down. Hold on. That sounds awesome.
This is great.
Oh,
I went into this chat thinking I didn't really like retellings, and now I'm just writing down all sorts of
I was like, oh wait.
I like them more than I thought I did.
Cool.
Anything that has like flavors of Anastasia, I'm like all over.
Yes.
Which, is it a retelling? It's like...
Yeah, that's another thing where you're like, where does the line get drawn at, like, what's a retelling? Because, like, well, there's that, which is, like, technically kind of history, but also sort of myth.
But also myth. Yeah.
But then also, like, well, we had the, even, like, the Dorothy Must Die, we had that, which was the Wizard of Oz retelling, which I appreciated. I'm not super in love with, but I like them. But that's, you know, like, that's an old movie, so that's not even a... I mean, technically it is classic literature. It is literature, but, you know.
Well, and I was thinking, too, when I was brainstorming titles, My Lady Jane, which is based on history.
I love that one so much.
I love it so much.
Old enough that, to me, it feels like a fairy tale, like, even though it is historical. And also, it's a fantastic book.
That book is so good.
It's so good. Like, the commentary, I just love it so much.
If I thought of it, I would have ranked it near the top of my favorites.
Yeah. I put it on my list of them when I was going through my Goodreads earlier because it's just so great. Like, I love the point. There's a point in the book. For those of you who haven't read it, it's about Lady Jane Grey, but it's like with magic and just like
and
comedy and ridiculousness. And so there's a point like the first like third of it is like more true to history, but with magic mixed in. But then it reaches a point where it's completely branched off from what's really happened. And
the authors
they have this note where they're like, up to now, we've like based this off of historical records. Now we're telling you the true story. Like, it's just so ridiculous. I love it.
And I just wish there was more, like, it's so funny and whimsical. And I think there's room for that in YA more than, like, I don't see a ton of, like, really funny, whimsical YA, but I think there could be more of it. And I think that book shows that. Mm-hmm. So please write more of that if you're writing. Maybe I'll write that. I can do whimsical.
Yes, do it.
We had a question from Jody about public domain. Where would someone have to check to see if a public domain work is available in the US and UK? She then mentioned, like, isn't Sherlock Holmes in the public domain in the UK, not the US, but it is public domain in the US. There was, like, all this drama a few years back about, like, possibly pulling it from public domain in the US, but I think it went to, like, the Supreme Court, and they were like, no, it's public domain.
I Googled Peter Pan, and Google would probably be the easiest answer to the question. It says,
I know there's like a year cutoff. There's like, if things are published before a certain year, then they're public
in the US, it's 1923.
But
if it was published.
If it's published before 1923 in the US, you're good to go. If it's published between like then and like the 40s or 50s, there's all sorts of weird things that maybe just Google it for the individual work.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the UK.
There's also a law of, like, in the US, this is, because I also don't know anything outside of the US, but there's a law of, like, if it was never published, like, during the author's lifetime, then it's, like, 70 years after their death is the cutoff. There's a lot of weird stuff. Yeah. Google is your friend. Referring to the Swan story, EAS said it's called The Six Swans, Brothers Grimm.
Huh. I was under the impression that it was like 12, but you know what? If it's only 6, that cuts down a lot of things. Thank you very much.
Less characters to name.
Exactly. Like 12's a lot, man. But like, okay, sure. You know, it's a classic fairy tales where everyone has like 18 brothers.
Yeah, very nice.
6 months? Huh. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yay.
I was thinking about we read Tiger Lily for a book club a long time ago, and I found that one to be a really fascinating retelling because it, rather than being like a retelling where you get like the Cinderella character, it was like Peter Pan but from a different character's perspective. And I always find those extra fascinating. And I feel like when you're writing retellings that way, you have a lot more you can play with and a lot more like backstory you can create yourself.
I was trying to think what other retellings I really like, because there's kind of a set couple that like everyone likes. Like everyone likes Cruel Beauty, everyone likes the Lunar Chronicles, everyone likes Throne of Glass, but there's an awful lot of like indie ones and just other ones that aren't quite as popular, because I think you have to be really good at rewriting them. Otherwise, it's just kind of like whatever. So I remember reading some kind of sci-fi Beauty and the Beast, but alien thing like a long time ago, and I was like, "What in the heck is this? So weird."
I still want to read Megan Spooner's Hunted, which is Beauty.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Oh yeah, right. I forgot about that.
I've been meaning to read it for forever. Yeah, it's out. I'm just.
Oh really?
I think it came out,
Wow.
like
Okay.
last year or something, but I've never gotten around to reading it.
Okay. I am just super.
And
out
I'm
of it.
still like, I finally made it to like number 30 on the library wait list or something like that. So
Crazy.
Damn.
apparently people like that one or want to read it or something. But
For real.
Well, I'm going to ask this because what did you guys think of Rosamund Hodge's other books? Because she has Crimson Bound and Bright Smoke, Cold Fire, and those technically were retellings too.
I love Crimson Bound, which is a retelling of Red Riding Hood. Yes.
Yes.
I think that one's really cool. I didn't like it as much as
So
Cruel
weird.
Beauty, but it's very weird, but
So
Cruel Beauty is too.
weird. Well, if you think Cruel Beauty is weird, you then read Crimson Bound, you're like, what?
Bound's even weird.
The hell?
But it's a really
So
cool
weird.
story, and I love, like, I don't know, it definitely reminds me a lot of Cruel Beauty, where like kind of the way she twists the story towards the end, and there's always things you aren't expecting, which is hard to do with retellings. So I really like that one. I did not like Bright Smoke, Cold Fire. It's a for anyone who doesn't know, it's a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, and I think a big thing for me is if I don't like the source material very much, I'm probably not going to like the retelling. But I was optimistic about that one because she doesn't like Romeo and Juliet either, Rosamund Hodge. So I was like, well, maybe this will be okay then, but I still just didn't.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. It was like Romeo and Juliet, but like with magic and zombies, but like 4 love interests. Like it was very
It had
strange.
too many things going on, which I think can be a risk in retelling sometimes. But she tried to like incorporate too many elements, and so I just felt kind of like I was just like floating in a mess of things and couldn't figure out what to focus on. So
Okay, I know that the Frappuccino machine is going on right now, but I really want to talk about something, so fingers crossed I can just drown it out for a little bit. Oh, there we go, stop, okay. If you guys want a super weird fairy tale retelling, read Vasa in the Night by Sarah Porter.
Oh, I love the cover of that one.
that one
Weird.
is,
Okay, so it's based.
ebook deal like a few days ago. I don't know if it's still. I just barely bought it because it was an ebook deal.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So it's based on the Russian folktale of Vasilisa in the Night, and it has to do. It's kind of like a Cinderella almost. It's like Cinderella, and then also Baba Yaga comes into it. Which, if you know anything about Russian mythology and folklore, it's kind of like this old hag that lives in a swamp that like will cut you deals, but then she also is like kind of cruel. She's kind of like a genie, but like she's an old woman, and she lives in a house that has chicken legs and it moves. It's odd by itself. But then you get Vasa in the Night, which is a contemporary that's based in Brooklyn, but it's also magic realism, but it's also based on Vasilisa, and it is the weirdest book I have read this year. It's so strange. And oh, actually, I think I got an advance copy. When did it come out? It might have come out last year.
September 20th of last year.
Okay, there we go.
Pulled
So
up
it came
right
out.
now.
Okay, so yeah, I was like, okay, that was
And
last
it
year.
is on
But,
sale if anyone is
Yeah,
curious.
it's $3 for Kindle.
hey,
So,
And I got it on
so
note, so
it was good, but it was just bizarre, and it's very different. Very different. So if you're looking for something new, try that out.
oh, I
I
have
forgot about that. 'Cause, like, sometimes at the bookstore, people are like, "Oh, what's this? Like, is it good?" I'm like, "It's real weird." They're like, "Is it good?" I'm like, "It's just weird."
I have another recommendation.
yeah.
So the Shadow Hero by Jean Luen Yang.
Ooh.
So it's kind of interesting. So it's a graphic novel, retelling sort of, it's, I guess, an origin story for this like 1940s comic book character called the Green Turtle, who only ever was in like 10 comic books or something, very obscure. But the original comic book was by like one of the only Chinese writers of comic books like back in the 40s. And so Jean Luen Yang takes this and kind of reimagines this origin story, because when the original character was published, the author had wanted to make a Chinese superhero, and the publisher said, no, that won't sell in the 1940s. And so he wasn't written that way, but like his face is never shown. So Jean Luen Yang kind of reimagined it as if like this was a Chinese character all along. And he's a phenomenal writer. I like recommend anything he writes, but if you're into like comic books and graphic novels, like that's a fantastic one.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I also just realized that as I'm reading technically it's an advanced copy, but it does come out this month, so you guys can get it if you want. I completely forgot. I was going to base this chat on this new book coming out called Girls of Snow and Glass. Girls Made of Snow and Glass? Girls Made of Snow and Glass. And it's a feminist retelling origin story of Snow White and the Evil Queen. And it comes out sometime, it is now September, it comes out sometime this month. And it's super neat because we see from the perspective of technically the girl who is Snow White. And then we also see the origin story of her stepmother, you know, the evil stepmother. And one is made of snow and one is made of glass. And it's a super neat idea. And it's, because it is feminist, it's actually really interesting because it's not hardcore feminism, but it does go into, especially the main character being like, I don't want to be pushed around anymore and I need to make good decisions. But I don't necessarily want to, but I'm going to make good decisions. And then the evil queen, who is, you know, evil, basically going into like, I want to do what is right for my kingdom, and that kind of sucks, but I'm going to have to make hard decisions and I'm going to do them. So I really am enjoying how I'm almost done. I'm enjoying how it's turned out so far. So if anybody wants to, you know, check that out, there's going to be a new Snow White one coming out soon.
It's coming out in 2 days.
Oh, on the 5th. Coming out September 5th. Hey.
I am a huge sucker for anything that's from the point of view of the bad guy or the original story.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I like this too, like from the villain's point of view. I'm like Megan, I kind of like when it turns out they're not actually maybe the bad guy.
That's fair.
Megan likes it when they're just straight up the bad guy. I mean, and I sometimes like that too, but I kind of like ones that flip it, so it's like, oh, okay.
I feel like villain stories can be really difficult to do, but when they're done well, they can be amazing. Like has anyone else read Marissa Meyer's Heartless? It's like her like villain origin
I
story.
started it, I couldn't get into it.
Yeah, it was
I
okay.
didn't love it. Like because
It
it
was
was
so much darker.
yeah, but it's also like it's like it wasn't really dark, but it's also so bleak. Like at the end, you're just like, okay, everything just sucks, and it just like ends where you're like, everything sucks. There's no hope. Like she really is evil now. Like I don't know. Like it just felt very bleak. Where I was like, why did I read this whole book?
I love that.
Yeah, well, if anyone doesn't know, Heartless is the story of the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland, and like how she became the evil queen. Yeah, it was okay. I kept expecting it's whimsical, but I wanted it to be so much darker.
I kept expecting there to be some sort of twist at the end, I guess.
Yeah,
and there really was no twist to it. It's just like the guy dies, and sorry for spoilers, but she becomes the Queen of Hearts, and she's evil, and she starts taking people's heads, and you're just kind of like, and the book's done.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I was disappointed because again, it was very whimsical, and I was expecting it to be much darker. And then by the end, we get all those scenes of like the three little girls, in the well and like in the maze, and they're so creepy and they're so foreboding, and I'm like, something awesome has to happen. And then it never really did. And I was kind of like, I want a whole book of just the ending, because the end part was so cool. And I also like how she incorporated the other Peter Pumpkin Eater. I love how she put that into the story and made it a part of that. I was like,
the world is really cool in that book.
Yeah,
I just think the story wasn't as great as it could have been.
I love it. I feel like if I know going in that like that's the kind of ending I'm in for, then I am like
somehow
ready.
The story tricked me to thinking there was gonna be some sort of twist and it wouldn't be that bleak, and then it just was bleak, and I was like, and just like hopeless, like it's just so hopeless at the end, and it's just like, okay.
The thing with expectations kind of reminds me of like when Rachel and I, and then like later Emma read Winter Song.
I was gonna bring up Winter Song as an example,
which is also a retelling, so it's relevant. But
I would say it's like an inspired book.
Inspired by,
inspired by.
So we were like enjoying it, and then like I think Rachel and I were reading it almost at the exact same time.
Yeah, almost.
And we were like, get done. I got done, and I just like frantically, I'm like messaging Rachel, like it ended like that.
I remember you sending me that Snapchat that was like the book in the corner, and you like took a picture of it, and you're like, think about what you did.
Oh man! Apparently, and to be fair, at the time I did not know there was going to be a sequel, so that changes.
And that was an expectations perspective problem, where I think a lot of people thought there was only one book. It wasn't really advertised or marketed as a duology. And even
I thought that there was just one.
When I finished the book and I finished it and was like, what's this ending? Not like it's not like it was some sort of sad ending. It was just, it like ended. It was like, wait, what was the point?
It's like, this is not what I signed up for.
No, exactly. Solved. Like, you kept hinting that this one issue was going to be solved, and it wasn't. So I was really confused. And even then, like, Goodreads for the second book just said it was like a companion book, and I was like, what?
What is this about her brother?
And you had to actually, I had to investigate to find like a tweet from the author, S.J. Jones, where she was like, yeah, the next book is a continuation. And I was like, oh
my God, okay.
I was so upset when I finished that book.
I know. Well, like that book by itself, that book was good, but also I felt like I was expecting more of a external, like fairy kingdom kind of book, and instead I got more internal struggle.
It's a very internal book,
yeah. So I was like iffy on it, and then it just ended like that, and I was like, what the hell is this?
And I think with it being such an internal book, that's why I personally, like, I'm excited there's a second one. I personally wish she had done it as a standalone book, and that both of the issues had been solved in one book, because I think she could have had more external struggle if she'd done that. And I don't know, like, I'm going to read the second book because I want to find out what happens, but I'm also kind of like, I didn't really want more. I just wanted it to be solved and them to be together and it to be done. Like,
that said, I'm going to buy it just because the book cover is so beautiful. The first one was beautiful, and then the second one was like, this is even more beautiful.
Right? I'm a sucker for a pretty cover. And all fairy tale retellings have amazing covers, so I want all of them.
I know, that's what I've been thinking throughout this chat, like, oh, I love the cover to that book.
Yes.
Well, again, I just love like fairy books, and a lot of fairy tale books have fairies in them. So, like, I am game. I'm down for this.
See, fairies are a hard sell for me.
Me too.
No, but there's just for me, I'm obsessed. I love them so much. I love that world. I think there's just last week we talked about The Call by Heather O'Gillian, and that's a dark fairy book, and it's not fairy tale related at all, but it's dark, creepy fairies. That's my favorite thing to read.
I'm always like really interested in the books like The Call, where it wasn't a fairy tale retelling, but it felt like a fairy tale. Like 200 years from now, you can look back on it and be like, yeah, that was the fairy tale of our time.
Ooh, good way of describing it. Well, I think it's something like having books with fairy tale elements, and that's that's fun to read too. And like that one had a very like story, like myth, like kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, I love books that bring in some mythology.
Yeah.
We had a question. How do you make a retelling believable when you're setting it in a completely different genre, like a contemporary or dystopian or sci-fi?
I think it's taking the problems that they have and then making them right. You know, like if you're gonna make it like I'm gonna go with Cinderella again just because it's easy. If you're gonna make a Cinderella story in modern day, you know, instead of have the ball, make a school dance. Just like make it believable. You know, Prince Charming is like the cute guy at school or whatever, and you're gonna make parallels to it.
Yeah, you have to think also about like how issues the characters face, how they translate. Because like if you're doing Pride and Prejudice in modern day, like, and if it's YA, your 17-year-old characters aren't going to be like freaking out about getting married to secure their family's fortune, you know, like, and their mom's not going to be going like, you gotta get married.
I was actually thinking about, as a good example, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, which isn't a book, but it's fantastic because they take like all the same issues that were like important for the characters in Pride and Prejudice. So like, but they're and kind of take the aspects of those that are the same, but like relevant today. So it's not like she's feeling an inordinate amount of pressure to get married necessarily, but there's like a lot of other societal pressures that she's dealing with. And like with Lydia, like, I mean, obviously a lot of Lydia's conflict is very dated, but there's still a lot about her reputation that becomes part of the conflict that still
they do a really good job of translating
ties into the original
Lydia's, because obviously like running off and eloping and getting married wouldn't be a major scandal that would matter, you know, today, like it did back then.
Especially not going to be like none of the family can get married, like your sister did this and now you
marry
can't
us now. Like,
that's how it
but it
works
is
in
like
my
if her
family.
reputation is
yes.
Um,
Because some like retellings won't feel realistic if characters, I don't know, like you have to give me a good reason for why Cinderella isn't just ditching her family, you know, or like, you know, things that are keeping them in the situation they're in, or in like Lizzie Bennet Diaries, there is a lot of pressure from their mom for them to get married, but it's because of their financial problems. Their family's in a ton of debt. And their parents are basically like, we need you out of the house so we don't have to support you anymore, you know? So, and we don't want you to be in the same situation we're in. So marry somebody with lots of money and just be happy.
mm-hmm. Or if you're doing it like YA, maybe like there's a guy whose dad is like in charge of a massive scholarship or something for college, and so they want to like impress him. But someone should write that. Someone else write that. And
You read it, Megan. You read it.
Oh, I'm so bad at contemporary. If I can't kill someone, I don't know what to do.
People can die in contemporaries, okay?
Megan, I want you to write a contemporary retelling of Pride and Prejudice where people die. Please write that.
Megan, killing off a character is not the answer to everything.
Maybe I just need to get more into like slasher horror novels.
There you go. Perfect.
Do a horror Pride and Prejudice, I'd read it.
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice and Zombies has already happened. You get me.
This chair I'm sitting in, if you like,
I was like, don't fall
far to the left,
don't
it
fall
like
out,
starts
don't
to
fall
fall. I keep doing it. I'm like, ah.
I'm sorry for the terrible light, but this is like the only spot this chair by plug, so
Where are you, Emma? That's not your house, right?
No, not a friend.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yep. Just, you know, in a random person's bedroom, it's cool, whatever.
As one does.
Yeah.
So I had a great Wi-Fi connection, so I just like showed up.
Yeah.
Just crawled in the back window and started streaming.
Found a computer with some headphones.
Nice beats.
Oh gosh.
Now, well, we've been going for about an hour, so is there any final questions before we
Did we have any like? I feel like we got a little sidetracked when we were talking about things people would like to see retellings of or would like to write retellings of. Were there any more of those that people didn't say before that they would like to see? No? Okay.
I want to see a Pride and Prejudice where someone is seducing Darcy to get a scholarship.
Yes. That sounds like a great idea.
When Megan mentioned Anastasia, like I have wanted to do Romanoff stuff for a long time, but it's hard because like they really died. Like it's
yeah.
So
Yeah, that's pretty definitive.
I love
Yeah.
History spoiler.
The myth of Anastasia inspired kind of book.
Yeah.
Good.
Or like a book where like reality happened and they all died, but someone is like taking advantage of the myth.
yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And like also just like more books like based on like historical events I think could be really cool. Like My Lady Jane is a ridiculous example, but like there's other things too.
And I Darken.
Yes, that's a good one.
Where they did the gender swapped Flood the Impaler. That one's by Kirsten White and is amazing, and you should all read it.
I can never believe how few retellings there or like YA stories there are set in the French Revolution. Because I feel like that would be such a great setting for like a YA book.
It would. It's very dramatic.
What's that glitter? Isn't that one French
Which one?
Revolution-y? There's a book that has glitter in the title. And there's like magic, but it's also kind of French Revolution.
I know there's that like Les Mis the Jungle Book.
No, that's
that one's being,
that was from my Pitchforks here.
Yeah, that's from your Pitchforks.
Oh, sorry, your Pitchforks here. Oh, that's cool.
Les Mis is another one that I would like.
Yeah.
Which, and I don't know how one would do that because that book is so like massive in scope. But.
Kate Grant did it very, very well. Was it just called Glitter?
And
it was Glitter by April Lynn Pike.
That Glitter
really?
is Marie Antoinette.
No,
Yes, Marie Antoinette.
Yeah,
Marie Antoinette.
but it has drugs or something in it too, like magical
Yeah.
drugs.
Yeah, it's like
I wanted to read that one.
Futuristic Marie Antoinette or something.
I don't know. It sounds dope. I forgot.
Okay, CR is growing longer. The other one I would like to see is like the revenge plot of the Count of Monte Cristo.
Yo, that'd be pretty cool.
I love Count of Monte Cristo. Although I'm like a traitor to book nerds because I actually like the movie better than the book.
Oh no.
There's a musical.
Really? For the Count of Monte
Musical's my
Cristo?
favorite. Yeah.
Less.
Yeah. It's on Spotify.
Oh my gosh. Amazing.
Go look it up.
All right.
Well then, I mean, that was a good hour of fangirling and discussion. Well, I mean, thank you for everybody that showed up and watched us this week. We had oh dear child. Okay. Sorry. Okay, screaming children, it's time to go. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and thank you for all your questions. This was a great discussion time. It was wonderful. We're going to be doing the exact same thing next Sunday, so make sure to join us for that. We're going to have your daily videos, as always, throughout this week. And thanks.
Next week is a write-in.
Yes, write-in next Sunday. So if you need to get some more, make sure to tune in. And we will see you guys all next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.